Greetings one and all, thank you for tuning in and watching my little shows on Gurdjieff. I do appreciate your comments and I appreciate those that have been buying my books and getting in touch, and thank you all for watching and spreading the word of my strange shows. Anyway, I wanted to do a little bit about All and Everything, pages 480 and 481, which are from the art chapter. And there's various reasons why I wanted to discuss these paragraphs, which will reveal themselves as I do my little commentary on it. So, Beelzebub is with Hussein and discussing about learned beings. And he talks about how all the free-brain beings of our planet, us on Earth, knew already about the laws of the currents of associative movements. Yet we had absolutely no information whatsoever concerning the laws that have been passed on to the contemporary free-brain beings. That's us today. You know, in the past they understood the laws of how the universe worked and such like, but we've not been told about it in today's world. And I know many of us are suspicious as to why we live in ignorance and why they keep us all learning by rote at schools and such like. But this is our opportunity for those of us that have that little niggling feeling that things aren't quite right, or that niggling feeling that there's more to life than what they're telling us, or have that little speck of suddenly waking up. We're the ones that are trying to learn about what the real laws are behind the whole running of the world and the universe and our part in it. So I'm going to start from page 480 at the top of it, and it says, as this said currents of associative movements does not proceed in the presences of the free-brain beings who have taken your fancy, as it generally proceeds in the presences of other free-brain beings, and as there were quite special reasons there for this, proper to them alone, I must therefore first of all explain it to you in rather more detail. The process is the same as that which also proceeds in us, but it proceeds in us when we are intentionally resting to allow the whole functioning of our common presence freely to transform, without hindrance by our will, all the varieties of being energy required for our all-round active existence. Whereas in them these said various being energies can now arise only during their total inactivity, that is, during what they call their sleep, and then of course only after a fashion. I'm going to end the quote there. So he's talking about sleep as in going to bed sleep, I believe, and how our bodies are worked upon by the energies coming from outside of ourselves and from the universe. And I've done shows about how the universe and the stars are constantly sending down vibrations to us, which will probably vary depending on the day as to whether they're good or bad, which is why astrology is very important and will have an influence upon us. But he's also talking here about how we are intentionally resting to allow the functioning of our common presence freely to transform without hindrance by our will, all the varieties of being energy required for our all-round active existence. I suppose the only time our will is not working or trying to interfere with us is when we are asleep, and so our will cannot do anything because we are asleep. And it's during our sleeping in bed period, when we are, at night sleeping, that we're allowing the whole functioning of our common presence freely to transform. So this is why we need to sleep. It used to be a question I used to ponder on me since I was a child. Why do I need to go to bed? Why do I need to sleep? Surely I can just stay awake and live my life without needing to waste time sleeping. If I didn't have to sleep, I'd save so much more time. I'd have much more time to get on with my life instead of wasting time sleeping. Though I know a lot of people like to go to sleep, lots of people like to go to bed, lots of people like to dream. I don't dream that, well, I probably do dream, I just don't remember my dreams that often. And when I ask, as I've been instructed to do before I go to bed at night, to please may I remember my dreams in the morning, I forget I've made that request and very rarely remember my dreams. But that's just me, each their own. And whether you think dreams are good to study yourself or not, I still don't know whether dreams are, I don't think they're prophetic, but I do think that they are a build-up of all our happenings and occurrences of the last 3 days. It's like a unwinding of our what's gone on in our life in the last 3 days, I believe, is what dreams are. Which is why it's very good to do the recall before you go to bed at night of your whole day, starting from the end of the day and watching it unroll backwards all the way to the beginning of when you wake up, without being attached to it, to them thoughts and those remembrances and that recall, that rewinding film of your day. Anyway, continuing with Gurdjieff. Owing to the fact that they, like every other free brain being of the whole of our great universe, have 3 separate, independent, spiritualized parts, each of which has, as a central place for the concentration of all its functioning, a localization of its own, which they themselves call a brain. All the impressions in their common presences, whether coming from without or arising from within, are also perceived independently by each of these brains of theirs, in accordance with the nature of these impressions. And afterwards, as it is also proper to proceed in the presences of every kind of being without distinction of brain system, these impressions, together with previous impressions, compose the total, and thanks to occasional shocks, evoke in each of these separate brains an independent association. End quote. So Gurdjieff's telling us we have brains in all our centres. And it is quite interesting that recently scientific studies have been saying there's a brain in the stomach, which, is linked to the solar plexus, which is what Gurdjieff's been saying all the time. Our stomach needs brains to think. But then again, where do thoughts come from? When I often ponder this, when I often put this across to people that I'm doing groups with or having associations with on the Gurdjieff work, where do your thoughts come from? Something to think about. And obviously in what we would call perhaps mainstream or the outside world of the Gurdjieff work, many people say our thoughts are in our brain. And then it comes to the discussion of, well, is the mind and the brain the same thing? The brain is obviously a physical object, whereas the mind, what is the mind? These are all questions that we need to ponder upon so that we have a proper understanding of how we work, how as a human being I go forward, how I operate. Many people just take it for granted that the thoughts that they have in their brains are their own. I often used to wonder where a lot of my thinking came from, because sometimes thoughts just came suddenly at me. And the more I study this kind of work, I realise that a lot of thoughts are coming at us. They come from outside. Where are your thought processes occurring? Hopefully in the mind, but where do the initial thought impulse come from? Nikola Tesla used to say about how many of his inventions were just put into his mind all of a sudden, and then he could think about them and make them work. So I think a lot of our thoughts are from outside. But who from? Our higher selves? Aliens? God himself? Who knows? But it's something that, again, or maybe I do know for myself, but we need to find out for each one of ourselves. Each person, you're probably getting your thoughts from different things depending on how developed you are, I suppose. I'd like to think the more higher developed you are, then you would probably be receiving your thoughts from on high. And then the dumber, more slow, sheep-like, sleepy person that you are probably being given mechanical thoughts from down in the depths of, I don't know, the lower beings. I was going to say something pretty derogatory then, but that would be awful. So, where is your brain? Where are your thoughts coming from? And how do we receive our impressions? I think that's quite important to think about as well. Are the impressions coming into our brains? Are they coming into our body? Obviously, we take in a lot of things through our eyes or through our mouths. And Gurdjieff talks about the 3 important types of impressions we should be taking in. obviously the air, the food we eat, and what we're seeing with our eyes. How is our brain working with these impressions? These are all things to be working and thinking about. And he goes on to say, so, my boy, from the time when these favourites of yours completely ceased consciously to actualise in their common presences the being part dog duty, thanks only to the results of which what is called sane comparative mentation, as well as the possibility of conscious active manifestation, can arise in beings from various associations, and from the time when their separate brains, associating now quite independently, begin engendering in one and the same common presence 3 differently sourced being impulses, they then, thanks to this, gradually, as it were, acquire in themselves 3 personalities, having nothing in common with each other in respect of needs and interests. End quote. So again, we're coming back to the whole idea of we must centre ourselves and bring all our centres into alignment so that we can have them all working harmoniously together. We should be in harmony with all our different parts, all our different centres and all our different brains. Whereas most of the times, different brains are thinking about different things and different centres are moving at different rates. So they're not all joining up together to work as one to help you. But to get them into order, that is how only we can do that to ourselves. We have to work upon ourselves. Unless you are lucky enough to meet some master guru who can reset you, which would be so fabulous. Because that would be nice to have someone come and do that for us, reset us, and then we go off. But how quickly would we stay reset? How quickly would we fall back into old patterns or be affected by old ways or start? Well, this is why you have to do this kind of training, the Gurdjieff work, so that you're preparing yourself ready to go forward in a more, when you had the opportunity, harmonized way, when you've centered yourself and all your centers, including your higher ones, are all in alignment. And of course he's talking about being part dog duty again. I've done a few shows on that. You know, this is the action as the results of intentionally actualized part dog duty, that is to say, of conscious labours and intentional sufferings, which is what we should be working towards. You know, it concerns the, I know it's the Okidanok. And it's just gone from my head what the other FMG essence that he talks about. Okidanok and Jartklom. That's it. And I know these are all strange words, but unless you're reading the Gurdjieff work, you need to start understanding why Gurdjieff uses various words that have specific meanings so that we understand them. You know, I remember Okidanok. Let me just see if I can find that. Hold on, I think I've got that here. Okidanok, the particularities of which are the chief cause of everything existing in the universe. So once we're working with them particularities, along with the Jartklom, we can then work towards becoming, well, working with the being part dog duty. Jartklom's all part of the cosmic crystallizations that we should be working towards. And I've done shows about this with Josh, so I do highly recommend looking back on the shows that me and Josh Denny have put together, where he explains these things so much better than me. But of course, working towards our being part dog duty is to help us become aware of who we are, working towards life, you know, being real. Life is real only then when I am aware of our genuineness, our genuine role on this planet, and what is genuine reality. What is real? And being part dog duty also has a role in learning to respect each other, you know. And I know some people really do step on our corns and make us feel ill of them or think ill of them, when really we've got to understand why people are like they are and why they enjoy stepping on our corns, and we shouldn't be doing it on others, but sometimes it does happen. And I've just found a little quote about being part dog duty in my notebook. The being part dog duty, thanks only to the results of which what is called sane comparative mentation, as well as the possibility of conscious active manifestation, can arise. And this is what we're working towards. We're trying to actively awaken ourselves so that we are conscious of all our efforts and all our manifestations and conscious of who we are. And to get to this, we have to be aware of how we're transforming ourselves. I've said before, this is all an alchemical process on ourselves to help develop ourselves so that we can become the gold that we should be, rather than the lead sheep that most of us, or mechanicalized lead that most people are. And Gurdjieff goes on to say on page 481, rather more than half of all the anomalies arising in the general psyche of your favourites, particularly those of recent times, are due in the first place to their having in their entire presence a process of three different kinds of independent associations, invoking in them the being impulses of three localizations of different kinds and of different properties. And secondly, because there is a connection between these three separate localizations in them, as there is also in general in the presences of every kind of free-brained being, predetermined by great nature, for other what are called common presence functionings. And thirdly, because from everything perceived and sensed, that is, from every kind of shock, associations of three different kinds of impressions proceed in the three said localizations, in consequence of which three totally different kinds of being impulses are evoked in one and the same whole presence. Then, on account of all this, a number of experiencings are nearly always proceeding in them at one and the same time, and each of these experiencings by itself evokes in the whole of their being an inclination for a corresponding manifestation, and in accordance with the definite parts of their total presence, a corresponding movement is thus actualized. End quote. So we're working towards bringing all our centers together so they can do a corresponding movement and work together to help us develop ourselves. And sometimes these little shocks help us to do that. And we must look at what associations we're dealing with and what impressions we are taking in. And I often ask Great Nature to help me in my development. I often ask Great Nature to show me the real world. And it is quite beautiful to go for a wander out of my house and along to the countryside to see what real nature is doing. Or even just look out of my window and look at real nature. And at the same time, I'm trying to connect with my own real nature. Who am I? What is my role in this universe? And to me, that's a very important part of what the Gurdjieff work is all about. I've had a lot of people asking me, will I become telepathic like Gurdjieff did? Will I be able to hypnotize people like Gurdjieff did? And they're obviously not aware that Gurdjieff made a statement saying that he renounced all that way of being able to develop telepathy, being able to hypnotize people. He wanted to be able to work in a genuine, realistic way, and telepathy should only be used if needed, in a certain sense. Wouldn't it be great if everyone could be telepathic and then we'd understand each other's pain, each other's... Well, it's something I was a bit concerned about when they're starting talking about all this neural link and all the chips coming in and how we'll all be able to understand each other. And I think they're probably thinking, oh, we'll be able to read each other's minds and help each other. But I think a lot of people will be so full of pain that it will upset a lot of people. And a lot of people will be quite hurt at what horrible thoughts other people have and how that will affect them. You know, we'll be seeing down into the deep darkness of some human beings, and then also the naivety of other human beings who could not believe people could go down such dark paths. Yet it is interesting, isn't it? Would we become a better human race if we could read each other's minds and realise what someone else is thinking? You know, you'll suddenly see through the falsity of many people who are pretending to like you when you can telepathically realise they absolutely detest you. Or that they could be someone who's very, you know, acts nervous or scared in front of you, and then once you can read their telepathic mind, realise the reasoning why they act like that, or maybe put you on the spot of, oh, I upset that person, now they tiptoe around me. Things like that. Would we, you know, these are just very simple examples. You know, it would go much deeper than that. We'd also notice how many people were living in a daydream, imaginative world. That would be very interesting, which the majority of the people do. They do daydream their lives away, whether it's for better lives or daydreaming a, you know, they're in a film, enacting a film role and they're taking part in it. I think they were saying in what was it, a survey some years ago, they were asking loads of men, you know, if they could be a certain role, what would they be? And the majority said James Bond. So how many of them daydream away that they're James Bond, some 007 spy that is able to save the world, which many people deep down really want to do. They want to be recognised for who they are. And for many people, the only way to be recognised is to save the world, to do that good deed. But as many of us know, when you save the world, everyone's grateful at first, but after a while they get a little bit pissed off that you're the one that saved the world, and while they sat back and stood by, and those heroes in the end soon get either forgotten or vilified or... Anyway, that's another dark thought I'm going down. We need to be our own heroes, and heroes for our families, of course, for your children. Help your children grow. For those of you that have children, be heroes for your animals, for those that have their pets. Which has just suddenly reminded me of a quote, which I know where this is in Gurdjieff's Tale. Just give me a moment. This is one of my favourite quotes because it really, I know it hit home when there was a few of us reading this. So I'm just going to do a quick quote from page 1078. Or again, when one of the contemporary beings of this peculiar planet, whose heart, as they say, always sinks into his boots from fright when, for instance, a mouse runs past him, learns that so-and-so, on meeting a tiger, felt a little timid, then this hero will be inwardly extremely indignant with him, and will, without foul, in conversation with his friends, foaming at the mouth, denounce him, and prove that he is a vile, criminal coward for having been frightened by such a mere tiger. And yet again the various books and manuals concerning also what must be done and how, and what must not be done on meeting a tiger or other similar being, are written by these mouse unflinching heroes there. End quote. Well, I normally tell people, you know, we need to be either a Jedi or a Sith. Hopefully you're not going to be mouse unflinching heroes, but isn't that an interesting couple of paragraphs? I've met so many people like that in my life and have tried not to be like that myself. And I'd like to thank Lawrence for my Jedi book. Thank you very much that he sent me, because I often talk about, you know, use the Force. Do you want to be the good Jedi or the bad Sith? May the Force be with you. May peace be with you. May you walk with your gods. And until next time, peace and out.